Okay, welcome to Chapter 3, Lesson 4, all about volunteers. Volunteers are the lifeblood of campaigns. If any of you have ever worked on a campaign, and I bet a lot of you have, you know the volunteers, they run the show. If it wasn't for them, then nothing could get done on a campaign. Nothing at all. I like this cute little meme here. Did I volunteer or was I voluntold? So whether or not you have some enthusiastic volunteers or you have some friends and family and people that you know that you can voluntel to get down there and do as they're voluntold, either way, they're going to be very critical to your campaign. So I just wanted to spend a couple of minutes talking about how to best use volunteers and also how to recruit volunteers. And then we'll have a whole other chunk of the course talking about paid staff and people that are like either paid staff or super volunteers that are more at leadership positions in your campaign. So for now, think of your everyday sort of volunteers that are knocking on doors, making phone calls, licking envelopes, putting on stamps, that sort of thing. So let's do this. So any task that really needs to be completed by the campaign, always ask yourself, can a volunteer do this? Because if it's something that they can even remotely do, then you should have a volunteer do it. All the money in the campaign should be spent towards like voter outreach or getting out the vote. So much that you can spend all those resources on that and not paying for other small little stuff, then you should do that. So ask yourself all the time, can a volunteer do this? And when you do get people that step up to volunteer and you're giving them a task to do, be very clear in your ask. One of the things that's most frustrating for volunteers is if they make the commitment to be somewhere and give their time and their labor to you, and then they actually make the effort to be there, and then they get there, they're already a little bit uncomfortable, and then you don't have a clear, a clearly defined activity or thing that you want them to do. That's really frustrating for them. So if they get there and it seems disorganized, they're not going to come back. They're not going to have a good taste in their mouth from that experience. And you want the opposite. You want them to have a great time so that they want to come back again, and so that they'll spread the word with other people and potentially become a volunteer recruiter themselves. So think about this volunteer as if they're your customer and you're working in a customer service company, and think about that you need to provide a really great customer service or a customer experience for them. So when you think about activities to give to volunteers, make sure that they are like concise, tangible activities. If it's, like our website, we're not really quite getting the traffic that we wanted. I understand that you've taken some computer classes and maybe you can help fix our website? No, that's not a good task for a volunteer. That's way too open-ended. It's way too critical and sensitive for the campaign. That's not the right thing. A better thing for a volunteer would be, hey, we have this Facebook group, but we're not sure if they're making their way to the website to see where they can donate and sign up to volunteer. So maybe can you go through the Facebook group and identify who each person is, and then cross-reference it with our database to see if we have any other contact information with them and drive them to the website. That's something that's a little bit more suitable for a volunteer, because it's clearly defined and it's like almost like a manual activity, or it's something that's very simple. There's a start and an end and an easy way to accomplish the steps in between. So you want concise, tangible activities for the volunteers. And it doesn't mean they have to start a project and finish it all at once. It just means that it's very clear how they proceed with the actual doing of the activity. So another tip here is to make it fun for them. Any way that you can have volunteers having a good time, then that's going to make sure that they want to come back again and give their time. When I was volunteering for the Hillary campaign in 2016, they had a field office right down here in the financial district in Lower Manhattan. And I did a lot of the GOTV stuff there. So we were like calling people and texting people, encouraging them to vote in swing states. And they always had like, there was some like celebrity DJ that was there spinning one night. They had like a famous comedian there one night. And there were some other like celebrity drop-bys and local politicians that would come by. And at the end of a couple of different nights, they had, it was like, okay, time's up. We're done with all of our activities. You guys better get to the dance floor. And then it's like playing fun music and everyone was dancing. And, you know, old people, like babies, everything and everybody in between. And like, it was so much fun. So anything you can do to make it a fun atmosphere. And the activities themselves are not always going to be fun. Like calling people up and asking them if they've voted yet, stuff like that. It's not always the funnest. But anything else you can do around it to make it fun, it's going to be a big win for you. So this tip here, train them. You have to provide training for every single volunteer that comes through the door, like no matter what they're going to be doing. The training could be a 30-second like little spiel, or it could be something more involved. But you can't have, you can't have volunteers representing your campaign and working on the campaign that haven't had some minimal little bit of training on what they're actually going to be doing. So anytime you can figure out digital activities for the volunteers to do, that's much better. So our world is changing a lot. We know that. Volunteers on campaigns tend to be young people or elderly people. There's not a whole lot in between. It's always like very young people or older people. So with regards to younger people, they're engaging in the world differently today than people have previously. And what that means is like they're much more comfortable engaging digitally. And so any activities that they can have doing digital activities or doing it digitally is better. And it's becoming more and more true for all ages too. Like if I asked you if you wanted to come volunteer on a campaign and I said, do you want to come for the shift where you're going to be calling voters, or do you want to come for the shift where you're going to be like crafting individual little notes that you're texting to people? People would way rather do the texting because it's nerve-wracking picking up the phone and calling people. So anytime you can figure out digital activities for people to do, that's better. And we'll talk a lot about that in the future lessons about how to make your campaign more digital, which in turn makes it more efficient. And yeah, so we'll get into that quite a bit. So you can think about volunteer usage during that time. Okay, now what about volunteer recruitment? So you've got the idea about how to use them. So who are these people? Where are they coming from? This can be the hard part. So let's talk about some tips here. So who are they? At the beginning, guys, it's going to be friends and family and donors. So with an emphasis on friends and family. It can be hard to ask people to do stuff for you. I know for a lot of people it's that way. I don't like helping. I don't like asking for help from any of my family for anything. I'm just kind of like a fiercely independent, grumpy person that doesn't want help. But when you're running for office at the beginning of your campaign, that's just the way it is. You're going to need to ask for help. So if it's a one time in your life you reserve it to do it, then do it. I also included donors in here because they're often overlooked as a volunteer pool. If people step up to give even a very modest amount of money to your campaign, they're actually probably pretty likely to volunteer on your campaign as well. So sometimes people have a line in the sand there between these different folks and don't think about the volunteers or think about the donors as potential volunteers. You have to erase that line and reach out to them to see if they'll want to volunteer as well. So also think about organizations that have endorsed you. We have a whole chunk coming up in the course about how to gain endorsements from organizations and the whole process around it. I spent a lot of time on endorsements from when I was running the Sacramento Stonewall Democrats. You got very, very deep in endorsements all the time, a couple of different election cycles. So organizations have this whole process about how to figure out which candidates they're going to support. If you are fortunate enough to be endorsed by some local political organizations, then one of the things that you can ask them for are volunteers. You can get on their newsletters, or they can send out email blasts for you, or there's a number of different ways that you can work with them to try and get some volunteers from their organization. And hey, at the end of the day, all you have to do is ask. I can tell you a lot of the time, candidates just don't ask for these sorts of things from organizations. The third one here is enthusiastic social media followers. So just keep an eye out for people that are always liking every single one of your things that you post to your campaign page. Maybe they comment on every single thing, or they message you and you're not necessarily writing back. You know what kind of folks I'm talking about. Make them come in and volunteer. I'm sure they would love to, and it'd be a win-win for everybody. So just keep an eye out on that. So these are the people that we want to target for recruitment. So how do you actually recruit them? So the biggest thing here, guys, is that you're going to want a volunteer coordinator on the campaign. They themselves could be a volunteer. It's a good job for a very extroverted, very social person. This is something that could be done by a family member, definitely. So if you have a very extroverted, very social, outgoing family member that wants to step up and help on your campaign in a more leadership way, or in a more substantial way, have them be the volunteer coordinator. Their whole purpose is to get volunteers for big activities the campaign is doing. So you set up like phone banking days or precinct walking days, or there's maybe a big fundraiser that you're having and you need some people to help like set up and all kinds of stuff. Then you tell your volunteer coordinator those dates, those activities, and what you're going to need, and then they manage it from there. Of course, you need to keep an eye on this, because if they don't deliver, it's going to hurt you pretty bad. So make sure they're competent, keep an eye on what they're doing, but if you can get a volunteer coordinator, that would be ideal. And in picking that person, also if they have a wide network of people that they could already pull from, that's why a younger person might be better. If they're, even high school kids, they can volunteer on political campaigns, and they often do volunteer a ton on political campaigns. So get somebody that knows a lot of people that would be willing to step up and volunteer. So last part here for how you could recruit volunteers is via social media. So you can just put the call out there on things like Facebook and Twitter. I say that Snapchat is a good source for volunteer recruitment, and we'll talk really, really in depth about the different social media platforms and my secret sauce strategy for how I think that you can supercharge your campaign based on the strategies that a lot of today's online and social media entrepreneurs are using. But basically, Snapchat is really good for cultivating stronger relationships with followers. It's not the kind of social media that you use to gain new followers. Like with Facebook, you create a page and you create some flashy, cool content, and it gets shared all over the place, and then pretty soon friends of friends and friends of friends and friends of friends of friends are liking your page, and it grows in this viral way. Snapchat is not like that, because it's harder to find people on Snapchat. It doesn't work like that. It's not viral like that. So the people that you do have following you on Snapchat, they had to make some sort of effort to get to you and to stay following you. So that means they're going to be a pretty loyal follower. They're going to like you. So when you put out an ask on Snapchat for something like volunteers, you're going to probably have a pretty high percentage of people that would be interested in doing that. So Snapchat is a really great source. If you can for volunteer recruitment, if you can maybe like gamify it or have some prizes for people, think really creatively about that. You can, like, the first 30 people to sign up to volunteer for X have a chance of winning like a dinner out with Chris Moore, the candidate for Sutter County supervisor. I think that's the example we were using earlier, Sutter County supervisor. So, you can, there's also fun ways like that you can like gamify it and make it into a contest. So that's all I have for volunteer information for you. Volunteers are super critical. We all know that. Big thing is to get a volunteer coordinator in there that can really deliver for you. That will be the big thing, and overcoming this fear of asking for help, a fear of like reaching out to people. And we'll talk a lot more about this in the fundraising section coming up in the course, but you have to get into this mindset. I call it the fundraiser's mindset, where you're okay with asking for things. And a big turning point, and you can apply this to volunteer recruitment as well. So big turning point is when you realize in your mind that when you're running for office, if you ask someone, hey, I think that you would be really great at helping us to get out the vote this weekend. Is it possible that you could come by and volunteer at our campaign office for a little while? Rather than thinking of that as a burden on someone, that you're placing a burden on someone to come and do this for you, don't think of it that way. Think of it as you are asking this person to come help you on something that is so important to you, that you would only trust really, really bright, competent, wonderful people to come and work on that with you. So that those folks are they really are. They're actually feeling honored that you would ask them. They're not feeling burdened. They can just make something up. They can lie to you and say, I have to go to my grandma's house that weekend. It's not a big burden to them if they don't want to do it. But what it probably is an honor to them that you thought of them and trusted them to come and do that for you. So that's how you have to think about it. That's what you have to remind yourself about. So that's it for volunteers.